Hey everybody, thanks for tuning back into another Cruiser Chat with Otram. Same as usual, no format tonight, no questions or anything already prepared, just whatever you guys want to ask. I'm here to try to answer them. Sorry I missed last week. We went away for the long weekend and I was running way behind on packing, so I ended up having to cancel chat last week. And we'll see how this week goes. Normally I close the door to my office when I'm doing chat, but my wife's out of town, and I've got my 3 dogs, plus a temp foster, hanging out here with us, so I can't keep the door closed. So they'll probably be coming in and out throughout the chat. And as a reminder, I put a link in the chat window that is the link. If you click on it, it'll let you join the chat, kind of like a Zoom window, and you can ask questions live, audio, video, like that, or feel free to type them in the chat box. And for folks not watching this live, I try to record these every Thursday starting at 8 p.m. Eastern on our YouTube channel. So if you're listening to it later on Spotify and wondering where this comes from, it's on our YouTube channel as a live chat. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything new and exciting going on at the shop. And there's not really. Parts have been super slow the last couple of weeks. So we finally got parts for a lot of the jobs that are at the shop so we can actually get rolling on them. But we don't have anything really fun and exciting. It's all just regular maintenance and repair. Yeah, I went up to the Catskills in New York over the long weekend, got some hiking in, got new tattoos. So that was a good time. The weather was beautiful. It was drizzly and overcast, but great temperature. Leaves were starting to change. So it was really pretty, good hiking trails. I like it up there. Yeah. And Lee says, always need more parts. Yeah, it's been a struggle. Stuff that we used to get next day or maybe 3 days out. Now we're seeing a week and a half. This last order was almost 2 weeks. I don't know what it is all of a sudden, but it's from all of our suppliers, not just one singled out. So hopefully that's not a trend that's going to continue. Cruiser Outfitters, though, has still been getting us parts quickly. I think they're the only ones we've been getting really fast deliveries from lately. And hopefully audio is coming through okay. I took my mic setup apart yesterday because I was supposed to be getting a new mic arm today, but that didn't show up. So then I put everything back together and I did a test recording and it seemed okay, but hopefully it is actually okay. And I'm going to agree with Lee that Kurt's shop is amazing. Yeah, Cruiser Outfitters, every time we've called them, they've come through for us, and it's just been amazing. They always have what we're looking for. It always gets to us fast. We've also had really good luck with George out at Valley Hybrids and the Terrain Tamer stuff. But when the Terrain Tamer stuff got a little scarce, we started using Cruiser Outfitters more. So I haven't gone back to using Valley Hybrids as much lately. Yeah, the Shady 80 is parked at the shop, hopefully pretty close to running. I haven't driven it except for to go on Home Depot runs and dump runs in a year. And the local Land Cruiser Club event, Fall Crawl, is next week. So I guess I need to get it into the shop and make sure it's ready for wheeling, which will be fun. Yeah, so hopefully it's not that bad. And we got a question. Have any tips on dropping the gas tank on an 80 other than pulling the top connections and removing the drive shaft? Nope. I mean, it's gonna suck. Take the back seats out, pull the carpet up, go in through the hatch in the floor, to undo the high pressure line and the return in the vent. Be real careful with the fuel filler neck when you're undoing the hoses from it, because those are really, really common to be rusty. But yeah, it is not a fun job, but there's nothing really tricky about it, other than just dealing with rust, assuming you're in somewhere that has rust. All the ones we see are really crunchy and not fun to deal with. And Paul says he's about to dig into some front driver wheel shaking on 100 series tips. Not particularly. Oh, if it's shaking under braking only, I mean, I guess it could be two things. If it's shaking under braking, most likely you've got a warped rotor. A loose wheel bearing on that side could be causing that and or could be contributing to that. But, if you're going to be changing rotors, you're going to have the wheel bearings apart anyway. And lately, we've been writing them as just doing new wheel bearings, because it seems like every time we try to just repack them and adjust them, they end up being too worn, and we can't tighten them up enough to get the play out of them. So unless it's something that we have history of having done wheel bearings on, within the last couple of years, we usually just put new wheel bearings in while we're in there, because you're not saving any labor. You're going to have them out. You're going to want to repack them anyway. So, I would do wheel bearings, the adjuster stars. You're going to need the flange gasket. Depending on if somebody's been in there before and butchered it, you might need the actual wheel bearing nuts. They're really cheap, and a lot of times it's not even worth trying to clean up where somebody's butchered them with a chisel. We just, get new nuts and be done with it. Because it never fails. You think you've got the wheel bearing nut all cleaned up. You go to adjust it and tighten it, and there's a little burr on it that catches that adjusting star and rips the tab off of the inside of the adjusting star. So if you do reuse the wheel nuts, make sure they don't have any burrs on them that are going to catch anything. And good news that your 80 isn't rusty. Yeah, they are. Hold on. Why? If the 80's not rusty, do you have a rusty gas tank on the inside? Because I don't know why else you would want to drop it. Because you can do the fuel pump and the fuel sending unit from the top and all the hoses externally. Oops, where'd you go? And Burke says, while changing out AC compressor, I think I bumped my oil pressure sensor because the oil pressure gauge stopped working. Repairable or needs to be replaced? Before you jump straight into replacing the sender, it's really common for the center wire to just pop off. It's a weird, like mushroom-shaped fitting that a wire slides onto, and it's real easy to, like when you're in there with the compressor and that, just hit the wire and pull it loose of the sender. So you may just need to plug the sender back in. The other common issue is the actual stud breaks off of the sender, in which case you would need a new sender. But I would check to make sure that the wire is actually hooked up first, because there has been many a times I've been working on a truck, gotten back in it, not had oil pressure, and realized I just knocked the wire off of the oil pressure sender. And yeah, if your gas tank is leaking, I can see why you would need to drop it. Vaughn asks if it's worth it to do an EGR delete on a 3FE. My answer is always no. There is no point to doing EGR deletes, especially on something that's fuel injected. When they did the programming for the fuel injection, it accounts for the EGR being there. And if you take the EGR out, I don't know how that affects programming. I mean, it may not have any effect, but you're not going to get really any gains. It's there to stop you from pinging on the highway. 3FE, it's a tractor motor. It was never designed for fuel mileage. Yeah, and then depending on if it's in an 80, that's, it's even worse. So yeah, I don't see any point in deleting it, and technically it's emissions tampering and illegal to delete either way. Even if you're in a non-emission state, it's still federally mandated to be there. And Alexander wants to know if there's any aftermarket MAF sensor recommendations for a 97 LX. No. Factory only. Aftermarket sensors are garbage and do not work. We have fixed so many trucks by removing, crap aftermarket sensors. Occasionally, if we're in a bind, we'll run, like an aftermarket coolant temp sensor or oil pressure sensor, something like that. But oxygen sensors, mass airflow sensors, factory only. It isn't worth messing with putting an aftermarket one in there. I would put a used Toyota one in there before I put an aftermarket one in. And Nigel has a good point of definitely don't ground out the wire on the sending unit for the oil pressure gauge. Back to Burke's question. It does bad things. Yeah. I've also made that mistake. And Spec says, "Hey, love the content. Watched and learned a lot from you. Thanks for that. And purchased the crank pulley removal tool a long time ago and finally got to use it this year." Man, that must have been a while ago because it's been a few years since we've even made them. So hey, thanks for the support. And then question. I'm up on 35s and pretty geared out. I've rebuilt the calipers, replaced the master and the booster. Was wondering if it's worth it to delete the ABS and load sensing proportioning valve or just upgrade to a big brake kit. So, I'm on 35s and I'm running, I think, EBC pads and rotors all the way around. Not the slotted rotors, just their smooth rotors with, I think, green stuff pads. And I've got, really good braking, other than a really spongy pedal, because I'm assuming my ABS is leaking internally because I've replaced everything. I've not deleted ABS to see how one handles afterward. My brother deleted his, but I haven't driven it since he did that. And I would not delete the proportioning valve. It's nice to have it proportion, based on how much weight you've got in the back of the truck. Years ago, I disc brake swapped an old first-gen 4Runner and got rid of the factory proportioning valve and put a manual one in. And did not have it adjusted properly. And when I hit the brakes on the highway, locked up the rear end and went spinning down the highway. So having the proportioning valve that adjusts itself there is nice. And I haven't done a big brake kit on an 80. And man, the ones I've seen are like, I want to say they were like $3,000 or $4,000. I can't imagine that you're going to get $3,000 or $4,000 worth of better braking out of it. I mean, maybe I haven't driven one with it, but yeah. I just think a lot of times, on trucks, once you go to the bigger tires, the heavier tires, you're just pushing the limits of the brakes. So like the EBC rotors and pads or DBA or terrain tamer, like, those seem to really help, more than, at least from what we've seen, more than taking the proportioning valve out and messing with stuff like that. Okay, it's not too much on daily driving, but braking on long downhills, you get brake fade. Yeah, that can be an issue. And that could be pad fade from getting hot, or you could be boiling the fluid. If you've got moisture in your brake fluid, I've seen that happen a lot. So that may be something to look into as well. And Lee says he loves his deleted ABS, but his ABS kept turning on at the worst time. Yeah, we had a Corolla in earlier today that was in because the ABS kept randomly turning on. But that one was an easy fix on the Corolla, where fixing on an 80 isn't always fun. And Lee, I'm assuming you're talking about the Delta kit. I'm assuming they've got a big brake kit that you're talking about. I haven't actually seen that one. I've only seen the one that popped up on Mud that I think is out of South Africa, and I cannot remember the name of it. But if Delta's got one, I can't imagine they would sell one that wasn't worthwhile, because everything I've seen from Delta has just been amazing and has actually delivered on what they said it would do. And Spec says he's on about a yearly fluid flush. Seems that repeated heat cycles take in a good amount of moisture. Used DOT3 and 4 over the years. Another thing to look at, every truck that comes through, we test the moisture content on the brake fluid. And we had a few, repeat customers that, I checked the brake fluid and tested high on moisture. And we had just changed the brake fluid, like we'd just done a flush on them, like, within a couple of months. And I'm like, why is this got brake fluid? Like, why is this moisture this high so far or so soon? And it turned out, like, I went and checked a jug of brake fluid that we'd been using, and it was high in moisture. And I was like, okay, so I must have gotten, my jug must have, accumulated moisture. I need to get a new jug of brake fluid. So I got, ordered a new gallon of brake fluid in and tested it. And brand new sealed container was, testing high on moisture. Ordered another gallon in from the same supplier. Same thing, tested high on moisture, like brand new sealed container. So we ended up switching over to using Prestone because we ordered in containers from all the parts stores, and Prestone was the only one that didn't test high on moisture right off the bat. And to answer Lee's question on how do we bleed brakes, I've got a Brannick pressure bleeder, one with the air bladder that seals the brake fluid, and Power Probe master cylinder adapters. And Chris wants to know if we watch the Bring a Trailer auctions. I follow the hundreds, LX470s just for fun. I hate Bring a Trailer. We have seen so many trucks that were advertised as the greatest thing since sliced bread on Bring a Trailer that sold for stupid high money. And then they come to the shop, and we had one, it was a 100 series. And, it was like a $20,000 sale on Bring a Trailer, but it was advertised as being insanely clean. We brought it into the shop, put it in the air, and the rear axle fell out. The mounts had just rotted off of had just rotted right off the housing. And we've seen so many like that are just misrepresented and just garbage. So yeah, I don't believe in them. And Chris wants to know, what's your take on the low mile older hundreds with low miles in terms of expected repairs? Do you see the clean ones with low miles holding up just as well as if they were almost new? No. We've actually gotten quite a few low mile and even like low mile West Coast trucks through. And while they're low mileage, they're still 20 something years old at this point. The rubber has broken down. Like, they've got all the oil leaks. They've got torn CV boots. They've got axle leaks. They need the timing belts done. It almost seems like time does more to wear them out than mileage does, or at least on a pretty same scale. Yeah, it seems like the low mile ones need as much work or more than the higher mileage ones, because the higher mileage ones have been having the stuff done like on a periodic maintenance schedule. At least the ones that somebody cared about taking care of them. Where the low mile ones, they're low mileage, but they just sat in a garage somewhere, but never got the routine maintenance. Because they never hit those mileage intervals, but they've gone way past it on the time intervals. I have a Camry. It's a 90 Camry. It was my grandma's. And we got it from her in 2010. So it was like 20 years old, but only had 40,000 miles on it. And I ended up having to, go through and reseal everything. Replace wiring because it was brittle. Replace the axles because the boots just evaporated. I ended up having to put, quite a bit of work into it, even though it looked brand new and only had 40,000 miles. It just, the rubber had all worn out of it. Yeah, and Paul says, or I guess I don't, my thing keeps freezing. Bought a 100,000 mile 100 series and same maintenance as a high mileage, but the interior is perfect. That is one place where you will get away with it being nice. If the leather hasn't been sat in, hasn't had, 20 years of Cheerios ground into it from kids, you will get a nice interior, especially if they've been stored indoors. And Spec says, his AC is not blowing super cold. Does AC need recharging over time, or should I be looking for a leak? I do have an auxiliary fan and thick fluid in the clutch. They will slowly lose some refrigerant through the rubber lines. They're kind of permeable. So it depends on how long it's been since it was last charged. If it's been a few years, you might be able to get away with just recharging it. If it was just recharged within the last year, then you've probably got a leak. It's really hard to say without knowing how much is in there. You get a lot of people get like the AC Pro and all that jazz that you do it yourself from the parts store, and you try to top it off based on the little pressure gauge on the can, and that just isn't really a great way to do it, because really you should be recharging it by weight. So what we do, like first step of AC testing, beyond making sure the compressor turns on and the belt's not slipping, is we recover the refrigerant and weigh it and see how much comes out, and then we compare that to how much should be in there, and that'll give us a decent idea of what's going on. As far as like if it's been charged recently and it's down to almost nothing, you've got a large leak. And then we pull it all the way down and we'll pull a deep vacuum on it and we'll see if it'll hold vacuum. And if it'll hold vacuum, then we're pretty sure we don't have a leak. Then we'll recharge it by weight and recheck in-cab temperatures. But yeah, there's really more to AC than just doing a recharge. There's a lot of variables that go into doing it right. The 80 is pretty tolerant of just screwing around with a refrigerant can, but a lot of the newer modern vehicles are not. And Hop wants to know, 1998 LX470, can you swap the PCV valve to the screw-in type without any concerns? I have no idea. I've never tried changing it over. If it's got the push-in rubber grommet style, we use the push-in rubber grommet style. If it's the thread-in style, we use the thread-in style. Because the thread-in style, like you'd need the valve cover to go with it for it to thread into. Otherwise, it's not gonna work. But I've never tried, never thought about doing that. And Chris said, thanks for the thoughts on low mileage stuff. If I was looking for a Land Cruiser, what would be your perfect sweet spot in terms of year, mileage, condition, etc.? For me, I don't care about mileage. Within reason, like 500,000 miles, 400,000 miles, probably wouldn't buy it unless I was going to do a complete overhaul. But mileage and wear you can correct. Rust, you can't. You can chase rust, you can patch rust, you're never going to get rid of rust. So my main concern in looking for any vehicle is, does it have rust? Because if it has any rust in it, I don't want it. And I say that with my 80 series being a complete pile of crap rust bucket. But it was $800, so I made an exception. So yeah, I care about rust. Secondary to that would be maintenance. And then, condition, like looks, and then mileage. Year is going to be dependent on what series you're looking at. My go-to is going to be the 95 to 97 of the 80 series, but that would change, if somebody's looking for 100 series, 200 series, whatever. But yeah, I would be most concerned about rust over anything else. Rust followed by maintenance, because if it hasn't had the regular maintenance done, it's going to cost so much to do all the catch-up. And always get a pre-purchase inspection. And then back to the AC, pretty sure it's never been charged. No maintenance history saying that it's been done, and you've had it for the last 7 years. So yeah, if it hasn't been charged in the last 7 years, it is totally conceivable that it has just lost charge through the hoses. I would still at least pull it under a deep vacuum to make sure it holds vacuum before charging it, just so you know if you've got a leak. When we pull them under deep vacuum, and if it's marginal, like it doesn't really want to hold, down to like, 600 or 700 microns, I'll, fill them with high pressure nitrogen and then do a decay test that way. Because sometimes they'll leak under vacuum, but not under pressure. So we do it both ways. But yeah, it's a really convoluted way of saying I don't really support AC repair as a DIY sport. Just because there's the amount of tools to do it right. Granted, you also need to be careful of the shop you're taking it to make sure that they have the tools to do it right and aren't just going to top it off with a can from the parts store. Because we've seen that happen a lot as well. And be glad that none of the Land Cruisers, at least none of them that I've worked on, I haven't done the brand new ones, are still using the R134A and haven't gone over to the stupid 1234YF refrigerant that is insanely expensive and takes an even more expensive machine to work on. And I am so glad that the dogs are cooperating with chat. 3 of them are in here on the guest bed behind me. I guess the 4th one is sleeping out in the living room, but they're actually being quiet. I guess running around all afternoon wore them out. Lee wants to know where I source my diesel parts. That is the easiest question ever to answer. I don't. I don't touch diesels. I don't touch non-US spec Land Cruisers. So I do not have to order diesel parts. If I needed to order diesel parts, I would be getting them from Kurt at Cruiser Outfitters. And Paul wants to know what's my go-to for rust mitigation. We don't do rust repair work at the shop. I will say we've got quite a few customers that use like fluid film or wool wax, and that seems to be doing really well. You just want to, wire brush it off, clean it up, get all the loose stuff off. Like if you've got rust and surface rust already, clean it up, etch prime it, spray paint it, let that cure really well, and then wool wax. Do not use like a rubberized undercoating, because that is about the worst thing you can do. It'll end up trapping water and crud between the body and the rubberized undercoating, and you can't tell that there's a problem until parts start falling off. When I lived up in Boston, I was doing collision repair, and we would see so many vehicles come through that were just falling apart rotten, and the rubberized undercoated ones were always the worst. The ones that had just been cleaned and spray painted held up the best, because with just spray paint on there, if you get scratched, like if the rust comes through, whatever, the spray paint flakes off and you can see the problem. It doesn't actually trap anything. And same with wool wax. It won't trap anything, and you can see if there's an issue still. So that would be my suggestion. And Paul says, about to go with wool wax, so good to know. Yeah, the other caveat I will say to that is if you're going to have any work done, like, do not wool wax it until after the work is done. We've had, right now it's horrible because everybody's doing their preventative wool wax for the year, before winter comes on. And we've had so many trucks come through lately that have just been freshly wool waxed underneath, and then they bring them in for a major service. And it's like, I can't tell anything's leaking because everything under here is shiny now. But beyond that, like trying to work on everything is just slimy, sticky, and horrible. So if you're going to do any work underneath, do it before you wool wax it. And TLC94LS says that our old school 80 series knuckles or videos on the knuckle rebuilds and other parts were so helpful when they restored their 80 series. And say thanks. Yeah, awesome. I'm glad they could help. I was looking through a bunch of the videos recently and realized that a lot of the really popular videos, like the 80 series knuckle video and a lot of those, I shot before I had good cameras and lighting. So I need to go back and reshoot some of those with better equipment. And that is on the list. I just have not gotten to it yet. I went down the rabbit hole of, from doing all the videos and everything, I've slowly been upgrading all of our camera stuff. And, we're finally up to using a Sony Cinema-Line camera with nice lenses, better mics, stuff like that, trying to make it better. Like even this, I'm running audio from a shotgun mic through a whole mixer, and then Cinema-Line camera hooked up, straight into the computer and mixing it in the computer. Yeah. Where you guys watch my videos to fall down the rabbit hole of tools and repairs, I watch other guys' videos and fell down the rabbit hole of how to make better YouTube videos. And so, trying to improve each time. and it's fun. It's hard now trying to catch time at the shop where I have time to set up and tear down and shoot a video, and I'm going to have the truck long enough to do the video and not have, crash on the other side of the shop making too much noise. Because like a lot of people, I think they all think that, like the work we do, like the videos are like our vehicles, and they're not. It's repairs that come through the shop that I happen to have time while they're there to film a video on. So like people will make requests and it's like, hey, that'd be great. I'd love to shoot a video on that. It has to come through the shop. So yeah, it's good times. And see, I'm about to rebuild transmission and T-case. Never done it before. What is your experience with gear wear on both? 1980 FJ40 4-speed, and not a split T-case. It is hit and miss. It's been a while. It's been a while since I've rebuilt either of those. But it can be hit or miss. Like if they've sat with water in them, you can have, like lots of rust pitting on the gears. You really won't know until you open it up. You really won't know until you open it up what you need. Like I would, pre-order a rebuild kit. Because you'll definitely need that. But as far as gears, you never know. And like I'll run into a bind with needing something, and I'll end up calling George out at Valley Hybrids. And he's always been able to help me up with the stuff I need, as far as like gears and internals. But yeah, it's hard to say without opening it up. We've had some that like all we've had to do is a rebuild kit, and then we've had some where it was better to just start with another transmission and rebuild that because there was nothing salvageable inside the case. And then 97 LX fuel pump doesn't prime when starting. Fuel pump works. Relay has been switched with a known working one, and wiring visually has no breaks. Any ideas? I have it hardwired to a switch for now. No. Like if it works to run, I don't know why it wouldn't work to prime when you turn the key on. I would have to look at a wiring diagram and see if there's anything funky, because yeah, if your relay works and the fuel pump works and it works while you're normally driving, I don't know why it wouldn't prime. So like you don't hear it whine like when you turn the key to the on position. I don't know why it wouldn't do that. Like I would actually have to go through a wiring diagram and see if there was like a breakout, like for computer controlling the fuel pump versus just key on fuel pump. It's been a while since I've been into that circuit, and I cannot picture it out of the top of my head. And Spec says the best part about any DIY video is showing what to do when things don't come out easy. Leave the problem parts in. Yeah, I try to leave the screw ups and the tough stuff in as much as I can. Yeah, and if you're not hearing it if you're not hearing it prime, I don't know. There's got to be a separate trigger, but for the life of me, I can't think of what it is. And front diff oil came out green and thick. Haven't been through water, so blown axle seal. Installed diff breathers recently, but it seems like it's not going to help. Yeah, on 80 series, well, I guess any of the solid axle fronts, whenever we see it being thick and green, it's most always one of the inner axle seals on the knuckles blown, letting the grease come in that way. I would probably change it once. And like, as much as you can, like with the drain plug out, spray brake clean up in through the fill plug and everything to try to rinse as much of that old crud out as you can. Refill it, drive it around, dump it, refill it, and then drive it a bit and see if it comes back, because we also have seen some that had just been so packed up with grease in the axle housing, even though the axle seal had been replaced, there was so much just in the housing that even after putting new gear oil in it, it very quickly got thick and green and gooey again, just because it was collecting more of the crud that was still stuck in the housing. So it may be worth changing it a couple times to see if that's the case before, going into breaking down the knuckles and doing that, going after an inner axle seal. And I saw something up here about shipping in parts, but I can't find it. But I did just notice another question. For some reason, my chat window is flipping through and it keeps wigging out. Do LX470s have separate heater cores or one that is split of heat in the back but none in the front? Yeah, you've got a heater core, in the front in the dash, and then another one in the rear. That's what the heater tees are splitting off. That are up at the back of the intake. And I've never had to mess with the heater. I've never had to mess with a heater core at either end of 100 series, so I couldn't tell you what they look like or exactly where they are. I think the front one is smack in the middle of the dash, but I've never messed with the rear one on one of those. I think it's in the passenger side, quarter panel, but I've never actually messed with one. I've never opened it up to look at one. And Shane says, good morning from Brisbane, Australia. Man, that is a long way away. And thanks for tuning in. D94 wants to know if I've ever done an 80 series front heater core. I have not. I've done the AC core on those, which is super easy, but I've not done the heater core. I actually have a truck in the shop that needs a heater core, and I have a heater core for it, but I haven't done one yet. I've done some other stuff. Like modern stuff where the heater core is like, I think it was a GX, like a 2015, 2016 GX. And man, that was horrible. I had to take so much of that car apart. And Lee wants to know if I know how to remove the wine from a re-geared T-case. I don't think you can. I think it's just a product of re-gearing it. It's, especially if we're talking about the underdrive high range gears, it's two new gears running against an existing gear, and the existing gear has already taken a pattern from the original gears it was running on. So they just aren't going to super duper mesh well. We've got a truck that we re-geared recently that was, noisier than the guy would like. So we've got some Redline shockproof gear oil at the shop to try in it, but it hasn't actually been back for me to put that in to see if it makes a difference. But all of them that we've done seem to have some wine more than others, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's just, how worn the other gears were before they got swapped out. But yeah, I don't know that there is a way to get rid of it. We're going to try that shockproof oil. Oh, and Lee says it was good for 3 years and then started. If it was good for a long time and then you started getting wine, I'd almost assume you've got a bearing that's gone bad, because they shouldn't have been good and then gotten bad. We did recently take a truck apart that had high and low range gears in it, that we'd done, 4 or 5 years ago. And we took it apart to put a part-time kit in. And there was a random gear tooth floating around in the case. And the stock idler gear in the middle had sheared a tooth off. That truck made so much noise, like tire noise and everything else. I don't know that you would have been able to hear a change in whine from it, but I can imagine that would have made a whine, having a whole tooth missing. So that may be something to look for as well. We got 2 people from Australia in today. That's just crazy. And Lee says, oh no, yeah, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but sudden changes in gear pitch, never good. We had a bone stock 80 series T case with 450 some thousand miles on it that we just replaced for gear noise or bearing noise. I'm not sure which. We drove around with the microphones on it and tracked it down to the T case. And at 450,000 miles, we didn't even bother rebuilding it. We just got, a whole new T case and put it in. And it was crazy with the TK sitting on the floor of the shop, just spinning the output gear. You could hear the internals howling. I'm really tempted to open it up and just see what the inside of a 450,000 mile case looks like. And Shane has the point that bigger exhaust fixes all noises. That is true. Well, it's true up until a point. When you've covered up all the noises and then it throws a rod, exhaust doesn't cover that one up. Oh, and a question I missed. What's the lifespan for front and rear differentials? Rig has 330K on it now. Not sure if they've ever been opened. Like, my truck had 350 on it when I re-geared it, and the diffs were still okay. We've got a 100 series with 450 on it in the shop right now, and the diffs still seem to be okay. A lot of it depends on, how they've been treated. If they've had regular gear oil changes, have they been, overworked and beat in rocks, used to tow. But I can conceivably see them, going 450, 500,000 miles, if they've been maintained and treated well. They're one of those, I don't know that there is a set lifespan. Like, we've seen people kill them at 200,000, and then we've seen them good at 500,000. It's one of those, you just fix them when they're broken, and don't worry about them until then. But yeah, I mean, we regularly see them over 300,000, and I've seen multiples at 400,000. So yeah, it's totally possible for them to have high mileage with never having been touched. And Shane just says stereo ? And I'm not sure what the question is. Yeah, and TLC 94 says it's a shame the FJ he got was completely rust free, but a head gasket got it. Yeah, and like, we don't see as many head gasket issues on the 100 or on the 80 series as like the internet makes it sound like. But it does happen, and it's crazy. We've seen like 2 RAV4s with the 3.5 like in the last month with blown head gaskets. So I think it's hitting like modern engines even more. But yeah, neglect definitely seems to kill them. And Texas 80 Cruiser asks, do you think if somebody removes the EGR system on the 1FC that it will not blow the head gasket? I don't think the EGR has anything to do with it. I think that's, it's a theory, but like, we see them blow on 1, we see them blow on 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it's usually multiple cylinders. I think it's more maintenance and never having coolant changed, and just having the snot beat out of them more than anything else. And it's a long cast iron block with a long aluminum head, and they expand and contract at 2 different rates. So every time you heat and cool that thing, it's chafing against the head gasket, So I don't think the EGR has anything to do with it. I also don't think the head gasket problem is as big as the internet makes it out to be on the 80. And I've got just over 350,000 on my truck. And Shane says stereo fixes all noise. Yes, stereo fixes all noise. And Lee says his bubbles a little bit and the color slightly changed after 2 minutes with a tester. Yeah. I mean, it does happen. We've done, several at the shop. I've done way more head gaskets as preventative maintenance than I have actually blown. But it does happen. And then who says 2021 Lexus LX 570 worth $70K? Not to me. I'm sure it's worth $70K to somebody. I would, that's insane. I mean, the most expensive vehicle I've ever bought was $9K. I can't imagine spending $70K. I also can't imagine spending $20K on a vehicle, so I'm in the minority. But I'm sure there's a buyer out there for it at $70K. I don't think the new stuff is going to last as long as the 80s, possibly even the 100s. Just with all the electronics that are in it that need to be supported indefinitely for it to keep working. And Chris says he finally got an O-Tram shirt in the mail, and his kids love the dog. Yeah, I had a business coach that tried to make me change the logo. He's like, the dog doesn't make any sense. And it's like, it sure does. I like dogs. I have dogs. The logo is going to keep the dog. And Reef Monkey, who does our shirts and hats and all that jazz, I think he has it labeled as Land Cruiser Dog Truck or something like that. So thanks for ordering a shirt. We get a small kickback on those when Reef Monkey sells them. And I'm going to beg to differ with TLC 94 on if you have an FJ80 with over 250,000 miles would do the head gasket. I would not. I would not do it unless it blows. We have had more and more trucks lately that we've gone to do head gaskets for. And the head was too warped to be able to do anything with. Like it wasn't machinable. So then you have to find another head, and it's a whole can of worms that you don't want to have to open unless you have to. And we see plenty of 80s with 350, 400,000 on them that have not popped. Like, I don't think it's inevitable that they're gonna pop. I think some people get a bad luck of the draw. And a lot of people think it's not if but when, and I don't think so. Like, I don't think that all of them are going to pop. Like maybe if you were going to go across the outback or like across Siberia or something, then yeah, I would consider doing a preventative head gasket if you were going to be in the middle of nowhere. But like realistically, here in the United States, you're only at most a few hours from somebody that could do a head gasket if it pops. So yeah, we don't do them preventatively anymore just because it is such a can of worms that you're opening, and it can go downhill really fast. And Lee says to build a spare 1FZ for the turbo. Yes. I should probably be building a spare motor for mine. But I haven't. And TLC says, wow, interesting. What would you do on an aging 80? I would just do catch-up maintenance, make sure it's got fresh fluids, good belts, do the seals, that are leaking. Maintenance and fluids go a long way. And, we have so many people that call us that want us to just straight up do a baseline and replace everything. And to me, that's a waste of money. Like, we always tell people, hey, bring it in, we'll look it over, we'll compare it to the notes, like his service history, and see what you actually need, and we'll go from there. Like, I hate just indiscriminately replacing parts that don't need to be done. And Hop says, do you know anywhere you can get a code reader for a 98 LX470? It doesn't support OBD2 here in Australia. So are you looking for an OBD2 reader or a reader for the Australian market? Because for the Australian market, I have no idea. If you're looking for OBD2, I like Top Don and Autel, and they're, pretty reasonably easy to get. Don't buy them off Amazon because they won't be supported. But if you get them, like I get mine from aeswave.com, and they're awesome. But yeah, as far as the Australian market ones go, I don't know. And Lee says, no, he was saying to build a spare motor instead of doing a preventative maintenance head gasket job. And really, that's what we've gone to doing. A lot of them that are coming in that are high mileage with an actual blown head gasket, we're just putting a reman motor in them because it's such a can of worms to go in to do just the head gasket. 97 or TLC 94 says, wow, an honest mechanic, how good for you. It doesn't feel right to me to just go through and just whole hog replace everything. Like a lot of, like, I was in a coaching company for a while, and they're like, they're recommending belts and hoses at $60K. Man, Toyota belts and hoses go a lot longer than that. So we replace them when they start getting worn. We've got a belt checker that checks the teeth on a serpentine belt. If there's wear in the belt, we replace it. If the hoses are starting to leak or show signs of fraying in the cords, we replace them. But it just doesn't make sense to me to just go through and replace a lot of parts that don't need to be replaced. And that video on the engine with the super low oil was crazy. How is that engine still alive? He's referencing a short that we just did on a Kia Soul that had less than half a quart in it when we drained the oil. And yeah, it's come in that way multiple times. with no oil. And we see it regularly on all kinds of cars that come in with no oil in them. And we do an oil change and they just keep on going. And we tell the customers, like, hey, you need to start checking your oil more often, like every time you fill up. And we've gotten to the point where on customers that we know they're not checking their oil, we've started putting dummy appointments in our calendar that just say check oil, because our calendar sends out appointment reminders. So then they get an appointment reminder that just says check your oil. So we've been preloading those into the calendar for the vehicles that we come through that are low on oil all the time. So we'll see if that helps any. And who says, any suggestions on lifting 100 series, just 1 or 2 inches? My biggest suggestion is always to call Cruiser Outfitters, because they've done hundreds and thousands of lifts on Land Cruisers. And they've got it dialed in on spring rates, shock combinations, all that jazz. Like, you may be able to find the parts cheaper somewhere on the internet, but the expertise you're going to get from Kurt and his crew on picking the right parts for your lift is going to be worth it. So that's always my biggest advice. And that's, when people come to us for lifts, we send them to Cruiser Outfitters and just tell them, like, hey, call Cruiser Outfitters, have them sort what suspension stuff you need, and just have them drop ship it to the shop. Because they're just good at what they do, and picking all the parts and putting it together to dial it into exactly what somebody needs. And TLC wants to know how there was even enough oil to pick up on the pickup tube. I have no idea. It's baffling to me how little came out. But yeah, so we are just past 9 o'clock. So I'm going to go ahead and jump off of here for the evening. But thanks to everybody that tuned in and asked questions. And as a reminder, going to try to do this every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. If you want to ask questions and aren't able to tune in for the live chat, we've got a website called SpeakPipe where you can leave voicemails and I can preload them and play them on air. Or we've also got an email to ask questions to, and I can answer those on here as well. But yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in, and I will catch you guys next week. I appreciate it.